Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Sorry, Not Sorry, Dreams, Mistakes, and Growing Up by Naya Rivera. Read by Naya Rivera. Wouldn't take nothing for my journey now. Maya Angelou. Hello, America, and hopefully other parts of the world. You might know me from shaking my butt and singing in a cheerleader costume on Glee, or from throwing shade, or dodging it, in the tabloids. Or maybe even, if you're a super fan or just have a really good memory, from my child actor days on TV shows like The Royal Family or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Which is exactly why I wanted to write this book. I wanted to tell my whole story and talk about the path, which was really more of a roller coaster ride, that I took to get to be who I am now, an actress, singer, wife, and mother, currently knee-deep in spit-up. Sometimes growing up happens in the blink of an eyelash extension. You spend years struggling to figure out who you are, and through a lot of those years you feel like it's going to take a bit of divine intervention for you to pull it all together. And then, all of a sudden, you find yourself sitting in the dining room, wondering what to make for dinner and what that baby-related stain on your shirt is, and your adulthood smacks you in the face. And if this hasn't happened to you yet, God willing, someday it will. Holy shit, I did it, you'll think. I'm a grown-ass woman now. And let me tell you, it'll feel good. Writing this book gave me a chance to relive some of the best and worst times of my life. From pre-dawn wake-up calls as a kindergartner, getting ready to shoot my first sitcom, to being a 20-year-old with a fat stack of unpaid bills and an anorexic wallet. But you know what's crazy? Even when I look back at that girl I was decades ago, I still feel like I just saw her yesterday. Like she hasn't been gone for all that long. I started working on this book while I was still shooting Glee, and finished the last few chapters with my new baby boy Josie sitting in his chair just a few feet away. Motherhood means learning new things and having your expectations turned upside down every single day. But it has also taught me one thing for certain. Josie is my greatest success, and I will never do any better than him. So yeah, being a mom changes things and makes you feel different in a lot of ways, but for me, the big one is this. I'm braver. I've never been afraid of being an open book and telling it like it is, but now I can say with 100% confidence that 0 fucks are given anymore. I don't care what other people think, because being a mom puts everything into perspective. You no longer have to decide what's important to you because it's right in front of your face and chances are he's hungry. Josie gave me wings. I know it's cheesy, but it's true. And with this book, I hope to pass on a little bit of that flight to you. Your life doesn't have to be perfect for you to be proud. In fact, I think it's the opposite. The more imperfect your life has been, the prouder you should be, because it means you've come that much further, and also probably had a lot more fun along the way. And with that, I hope you have as much fun reading this book as I had writing it. 1. The Nene years. From the time I was in utero, it was my fate to be in front of the camera. The sound of flash bulbs made me kick, and I'm sure if the sonogram technology had allowed it, you'd have seen little fetus me trying to turn, so they got my good side. My mom was an aspiring actress and model when she unexpectedly got pregnant with me. She was only 20, but she'd already done pretty well for herself. She had worked a lot for Kohl's in her hometown of Milwaukee, and every weekend, there she was, in the Sunday paper, modeling a different sweater. Once she landed in Los Angeles, she ate chicken in a KFC commercial with David Alan Grier and wore bunny ears and danced in a freezer. What? In a Smokey Robinson video. In her first trimester, she even made an appearance on The Young and the Restless, where I tried to steal the show by causing a bout of morning sickness that left her making secret trips to the bathroom. Once I was born, Mom kept it moving and didn't miss a beat. She got me an agent before I could walk, and my grand entrance into life in the public eye was a topless scene. At 7 months old, I was cast in a Kmart commercial to crawl across the floor wearing nothing but a diaper. From baby age on, I booked print ads, almost all of which were shot in front of a gray seamless, with me wearing a floral romper, Oshkosh or plum pudding, the height of late 80s, early 90s kid fashion. Even as a top model, though, I couldn't just stand there, nor was it all fun. It was work. I had to do stuff like hula hoop, blow bubbles, pretend to laugh, or, the worst, hold hands with other kids. Usually their hands were sweaty and clammy, or they'd pick their nose right up to the very last second and reach their fingers toward mine. Even though I just recently stopped wearing diapers, I was 3 feet tall and all business. I got the hang of modeling really quickly and easily took direction from the photographer. When other models would get all teary-eyed and hiccupy about holding hands with someone they didn't know, I was always annoyed. Why do we have to convince you, I'd think. Just do your job and hold my damn hand and take the picture. I didn't even pick my nose. I also started to book television commercials, and soon I was Mattel's go-to ethnic girl, doing ads for Cabbage Patch dolls or twirling around with a Bubble Angel Barbie. Sometimes all they wanted in the shot was my brown hand, so I'd get a manicure and then have to hold a toy, very, very still, while the cameras got their shot. My agent was a woman named Arletta Proch, who repped mostly babies and child actors. My mom had a pager so Arletta could get a hold of us when we were out running around for auditions. And when the pager would start buzzing, we always knew I'd gotten a job. We'd head straight to a payphone and Mom would call into the agency. They'd celebrate by clanging a cowbell on their end, and on our end, my mom would pick me up so I could reach the receiver, and I'd scream as loud as I could into the phone. No matter if we were at a shopping mall in the valley or at a phone booth in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard, I practically tore out my lungs screaming bloody murder to show how excited I was. In retrospect, it's amazing my mother didn't get picked up on suspicion of kidnapping. At the time, my dad had a full-time job working in IT, which gave my mom the opportunity to devote herself full-time to my career, and she founded a company called 1+1 Management. She was my manager, and I her only client. My husband and I joke now that we're going to bring it back and that I'll represent him under 1+1 Management. Make no mistake, though, Mom was no mere momager. She was a badass and really good at her job. She took my auditions very seriously and considered every detail when helping me look the part. We made a lot of trips to TJ Maxx, where we'd dig through the racks until my mom found exactly what I needed. She also invested in makeup and props. I had a mole on my chin that we'd sometimes cover up using this thick, creamy makeup that was invented for burn victims to use to cover scars. To this day, I still use it for contouring. And we got really expensive flippers made, fake teeth that we could plug in when a real one fell out. If I was auditioning to play a girl who was kind of nerdy and wore her hair in braids, you could bet I'd show up with fake glasses, braids, and some dork-ass outfit of clashing plaids and prints. Since I was mixed race, I could play a lot of different ethnicities, from just plain old dark-skinned white girl to Latino to African American. Mom stopped short of giving me a spray tan, but if I was auditioning for a role specifically for a black girl, you could bet she'd encourage me to play outside in the sun. Mom's diligence and my hard work, of course, paid off, and at age 5 I landed my first television role on CBS's The Royal Family. I honestly don't remember the audition, but when I heard that I got it, I bet you could hear me scream all the way in San Diego. Created and executive produced by Eddie Murphy, the show was a family comedy that starred Red Fox and Della Reese as a retired couple who are forced to deal when their daughter and 3 grandchildren move in with them. I played the youngest grandchild, Hillary, and Red Fox and I were intergenerational BFFs from the moment we met. He started to tell people that I really was his granddaughter, and I believed him. He and his wife were so nice to my whole family. They were always bringing me souvenirs from their trips, like a floral lei from Hawaii or a tiny ceramic red fox. Get it? Red had a reputation for being a flashy dresser. He believed in dressing like a king, and so he got a lot of his clothes custom-made to fit his opulent tastes. When he'd hit upon an outfit he really liked, he'd tell his tailor, "Get baby girl one too," and then boom, we'd be matching. Which is how Red and I ended up going on the Arsenio Hall show, looking like we'd both just raided Michael Jackson's closet. In 2013, I went on Arsenio again to talk about Glee, and he surprised me with the footage from 22 years earlier. In it, Red is wearing a red, again, get it, the man liked to work a theme, jacket covered in gold chains and tassels, a red beret, and giant sunglasses. I'm wearing a cream-colored two-piece suit, also covered in gold chains and tassels, with a giant crown on the back. Arsenio asks me if I want to be a model, and without missing a beat, I tell him I'm not into it because I already did that. Then he asks if I want to get married someday. My answer? No, said in a tone of voice that implied that my pre-kindergarten self had never heard such a stupid question. However, my favorite outfit that Red gave me, and possibly my favorite outfit of all time, never made a television appearance. It was a gold lame bandeau top that showed a little belly, a giant gold poofed skirt with a black net tutu underneath, and a gold biker hat. Once I came downstairs with the whole ensemble on, determined to wear it to preschool. "Mom," I said, twirling around, "this is so cool. People need to see this." Mom rightly figured that it might be a little much for me to go to preschool dressed like a baby Paula Abdul, and marched me right back upstairs to change. That outfit is still in a box in my closet, though. The bandeau now barely fits around my foot, which is sad because I would definitely still rock that look if I could. On the royal family, I fell in love with being on TV. I just started preschool not too long before, so I didn't really have much old life to compare my new life to, but I was still aware that I was doing something special. We'd wake up for call times at 4:30 in the morning and quietly tiptoe around and out the door so we wouldn't wake up my dad before he had to get up and go to work. I never once complained about having to get out of bed so early because secretly I knew that if I was up before the sun, I must be important. The schedule for being on a half-hour multi-camera sitcom was super regimented, but not terribly strenuous. We were finished each day by the middle of the afternoon and didn't ever have to shoot on weekends. Every Monday started with a table read of that week's script. I still couldn't read, so I was basically a parrot in pigtails. Mom would sit me on her lap and read lines off the blue paper script over my shoulder. When it would come to my lines, she'd say them out loud, and I'd repeat them back. This was usually the first time the cast would see the script, so there was always a lot of laughing and joking about the lines. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were for the blocking rehearsals we needed before shooting in front of a live studio audience, which is a lot like live theater. They use terms like downstage and upstage, and you have to learn to cheat yourself, which means keeping your body open to the camera and the audience, no matter what you're doing. When the script called for me to do physical comedy, like running into the room while shooting Red with a water gun, or making a giant mess by inexplicably pouring buckets of paint into a bird bath, I had to learn how to do it without ever turning my back toward the camera. I remember one particular scene where I had to pretend I needed to pee really bad while they slowly unspooled me from a sarong. Another episode called for me to sing a song and do a little dance, hitting 3 different marks along the way as I walked off camera. I shot this scene with 102-degree fever, not because anyone told me I had to, but because I insisted. There was no way I was missing a day of work or a fun scene, and even though I was burning up, I nailed it. On Thursdays, we'd shoot any scenes that were too long to do in front of an audience. And then Friday was the big payoff. Shooting in front of a live audience on a Friday night always feels like a party, especially when you're only 5. When the actors come in, you do a pre-curtain call, where you run on set and are introduced to the audience. The adults would crack jokes, take bows, and shake hands with the audience, but since I was just a little kid, all I did was wave. Since we filmed at night, my dad was able to come when he got off work, and it always made me smile when he cheered extra loud. Sometimes people would bring presents or flowers after the taping, and after a few episodes of the show had aired, I started to get fan mail. My mom and I would sit in my dressing room with a stack of little headshot cards. She would open the letters, read them to me, and then I'd sign the card in my child's handwriting with a little heart and Naya, and then we'd send it back. To this day, I still draw a little heart when I sign my name, which actually irks me because I think it looks childish, but I can't help it because it's totally automatic at this point. I remember one time my mom opened a letter and started to read it to me. "Okay," she said, "make it out to Eddie. She started to spell it out for me, then stopped. "Oh no," she said. "Eddie's in jail? How does he even watch TV?" Needless to say, Eddie and I would not go on to become pen pals. The royal family wasn't a kid's show, so I didn't have many fans in my peer group, but occasionally people would see us out in public and come up to my parents to tell them how much they liked the show. One such person was Tupac, who saw us in LAX and came over to introduce himself to my mom. The story goes that he picked me up and held me for several minutes while he and my mom, who can chat up anyone, hit it off. "Where are the photos of this, Mom and Dad? Seriously, why didn't you take pictures?" Sigh, but still, Tupac held me. Legendary. On set, the cast and crew really were like a family. Every Thursday, Red's friend Bubba would make gumbo for everyone, and on the days when my mom wasn't eating gumbo, she was talking about how good it had been or how good it was going to be. I was a weirdo kid who loved shrimp, so I gobbled it up right along with her. Red Fox was most well known for his role on Sanford and Son, a show that had been created by legendary television producer Norman Lear and was hailed as having paved the way for African-American sitcoms. Red was first and foremost a comedian, and as the title character Fred Sanford, he had a bit about having a heart attack. He'd clutch his chest dramatically and wail and moan about, warning his wife that he was coming up to see her. It was all part of his shtick. On October 11th, 1991, less than a month after the royal family had premiered, Red and I were running our lines on set. He was sitting in an easy chair and I was standing on my mark in front of him, when all of a sudden he kind of slumped over and fell to the floor. For a while, no one moved. One of the producers even yelled, "Red, come on." Everyone assumed it was just part of his routine, so we waited patiently for him to stand back up. Except he didn't. Della Reese, who played his wife, was the first to figure out that something really was happening. She rushed over, leaned down to him, and heard him saying, "Get my wife, get my wife." Della stood up and started screaming, which jolted everyone in the room into action. The assistant director yelled for someone to get an ambulance, and my mom, who had been sitting and watching rehearsals with Red's wife, tried desperately to calm her down and assure her that everything was going to be okay. I didn't move, though. I'd been taught to stay on my mark, and so that's what I did. My dad happened to be on set that day. Finally, he noticed that I was still standing there like a statue, so he ran over and scooped me up. He and my mom took me up to my dressing room, where they set me down with some coloring books and instructions not to move, again, while they went back downstairs and tried to help. I hadn't really known my own grandparents, so for all intents and purposes, Red was my grandpa. I was way too young to process it at the time, but now when I look back, I realize how special and unique it was for the cast of a TV show to have such off-screen camaraderie and genuine love. The whole cast and crew followed Red's ambulance to the hospital, and we sat there, his TV family and his real family, all mixed together in the waiting room, praying and trying to comfort one another. When the doctor came out to tell us that Red had passed, he delivered the news to the entire group. As you can imagine, everyone took it really hard. Red was such a presence wherever he went. He started his career in stand-up, and he was one of those people who could turn anything into a stage and anyone into his audience. He was the first person I knew who died, and I still remember his funeral, which was held in Las Vegas, very vividly. It was open casket. He looked very kingly in a white suit, and it was a fitting tribute to a man who liked to live large. Della sang "What a Wonderful World," a song that can still make me teary-eyed to this day. My mom had become especially close to Red and his wife, Ka, so she took it really hard. She'd bring me to visit Red's grave, where Ka would give me a cigar, one of Red's favorite things, and tell me I could give Red a present. We'd dig a little hole, stick the cigar in it, and then she would light it. We'd watch the smoke curl up and into the air, and in my 5-year-old brain, I imagined him 6 feet underground, smoking away in that white suit and being just the same as he always was. After Red passed, the producers briefly brought in Jacquet to play Della's sister, and try to keep the show going. But as my mom said, it just wasn't the same without Red. The royal family came to an end after just one season. Glee would eventually be filmed on the same Paramount lot where we shot the royal family. And every day on my way to the set, I'd walk past the daycare where my mom would drop off my baby brother before she and I would head to work. I loved the Paramount lot, and returning to work there so many years later felt like a homecoming. It made me think about my TV beginnings and Red a lot. He was one of the first people to really believe in me, and I've always wanted to make him proud. Someday, I'm going to take that fox and a Ouija board over to stage 16 and see if I can say hello. I'd love to tell him what I'm up to, and make sure he knows just how much I loved that gold lame bandeau top. Slaying it in the early 90s. At this point in my life, I didn't know that much about school, but I knew that I liked acting better. I was around adults all the time. I was getting attention, and I got to wear fancy clothes and do silly things that would have gotten me in trouble had I tried to do them at home. After the royal family was canceled, and I wasn't going to an on-set tutor anymore, my parents enrolled me in the local public elementary school. At night, after I finished my homework, my mom would make me get my lines for whatever audition I had coming up and go into her room. When I was super little, Mom would just repeat everything over and over and have me repeat it back to her. Even ones I could read, though, she still made me go off book every time I went into a casting. This meant I couldn't walk in a room and read my lines from a piece of paper, even if that's what everyone else was doing. I had to memorize them. To this day, I can still learn my lines super fast, and can recall conversations I had months ago nearly verbatim. My poor husband, right? For the first 16 years of my life, my mom was the only acting coach I had. She was damn good at it, too. She'd give me pointers on delivery and body language, like, okay, but next time put your hand on your hip when you say that word. Or she'd demonstrate the facial expressions to make when I was supposed to get people to laugh, or when I was supposed to look mad or unhappy. In a lot of ways, my mom and I had a very adult relationship, but at the core, I was still a kid. Sometimes our nightly sessions of running lines would end in a screaming match with me crying because I just wanted to play, or frustrated because I didn't think she was listening to me. I also hated some auditions, especially those kid cattle calls for commercials that involved several hours of standing in line. Eventually, I got savvy enough to bargain when I knew that an audition would be particularly annoying, which was how I ended up with an all-white bunny named Duchess. Ah, Duchess. I was super into her for like the first 2 days, then totally forgot about her. Eventually, her tiny bunny water bottle proved to be no match for a summer day in Valencia, and she succumbed to heat stroke. After Duchess, Mom wised up, and my rewards were only of the inanimate variety. The first thing I booked after the royal family was a guest spot on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. While I hated commercial auditions, I took television auditions very seriously. I remember that I was barely out of that casting when I burst into tears. I was convinced that I'd done a horrible job and wasn't going to get it. Then we got a page from Arletta, and I went from mid-meltdown to screaming with joy into a payphone. The role I landed was only for one episode and one scene, which wasn't even with Will Smith, but I was on set long enough for him to call me cute. My mom and I were sitting on some stairs rehearsing my lines, and we were unintentionally blocking the entrance to his dressing room. He came by and asked us to move, but also introduced himself and called me pretty. I beamed. Wow, Mom, that's the Fresh Prince. So yeah, Tupac and Will Smith? I was totally slaying in the early 90s. After this, I booked a recurring role on Family Matters. I have to be honest, I think this was when I reached my prime in terms of my physical appearance. I played Gwendolyn, who was the 7-year-old love interest of Little Richie, and the costume department really knew what it was doing. Gwendolyn had the best hair and the best outfits. Her hair was always half up, half down, and full of scrunchies. Each of her outfits was made up of at least 17 articles of clothing. It was all about the layers. She'd be in leggings under a skirt with a long-sleeved shirt under a short-sleeved shirt with a bandana around her neck, and then they'd top it all off with something like a pair of little yellow socks and red Chuck Taylors. On a Valentine's Day episode, they paired a red dress with a leopard print coat and a big red flower in my hair. The look beats any red carpet ensemble I've worn to this day. Another highlight was when I got to drive a battery-powered Barbie Jeep. This made a huge impression on me. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and I loved it so much that it, unfortunately, influenced my taste in real cars when I finally got my driver's license more than 10 years later. Richie wasn't just my on-screen love. Off-screen, I was convinced I was going to marry him. He could dance, and he had the best jerry curl on TV. What more could a girl want? I thought he looked like Michael Jackson, and I was obsessed. I'd call his house to talk to him, and Richie and I would tie up the phone lines for hours. As to what our conversations were actually about, beats me. The pinnacle of our romance was the Family Matters rap party. As all the adults were getting drunk and the older kids were being cool, Richie and I burned up the dance floor until we were sweaty, him with his Michael Jackson moves and me with the Running Man, which I had mastered so well that it should have been in the special skills section of my resume. Alas, sometimes young love is just not meant to last, and I have no idea where Richie is these days. Nor, if I'm being honest, can I even remember his real name. My on-screen roles definitely led to some off-screen perks. Michael Jackson's niece was also an actor, and we were on several auditions together. Over time, our moms became friends, enough so that I was invited to her birthday party at Neverland Ranch. I was still too young to really understand what was so special about it, but my mom was freaking out, even though she wasn't allowed to come with me. The girl's mom assured us that there were chaperones, and that Michael was not one of them. The day of the party, we all met at a central location, where we would be taken to the ranch. Everyone else on the bus was like 12 or 13, but I was a freaking baby, small enough that I was still wearing white tights. Nicole Richie was one of the other kids on the bus. And when she saw a 5-year-old climb on board by herself, Nicole and her friend took me under their wing and let me sit with them. The bus ride was so long that I got sleepy and laid down and took a nap in Nicole's lap. When I woke up, I saw that I drooled all over her leg. Once we were at Neverland, we rode the rides and watched a movie in a full-size theater. I remember walking up to a concession stand that was filled with popcorn and candy. I had planned on just drooling at the snacks from behind the glass because I didn't have any money. But then the guy working the counter said, "Do you want anything? Everything is free here." If this had been a movie, we would have cut to a trippy echo sequence at that moment. Everything is free. Everything is free. I'd never heard anything so glorious in my brief little life. I gobbled up Sour Patch Kids and Raisinets and Twizzlers and then stayed awake for the entire bus ride home, all hopped up on sugar. The first ethnic Dorothy, at my elementary school at least. I booked one of the most important roles of my career far away from Hollywood when I played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. No, not on Broadway, but even better, at Valencia Valley Elementary School. The school put on The Wizard of Oz every year, and the teacher in charge was this biggish woman who always wore oversized muumuus and had long gray hair. During story time, she'd make kids rub her bunions. I was totally disgusted by it at the time, and now that I look back on it, I wonder, how did this bitch not get fired? But that's an aside. The Wizard of Oz was her passion, and she was obsessed with making it as good as it could be. The year that I could audition, she was practically salivating at the chance to have a professional actress in the lead role. She went through the dog and pony show of holding auditions, but I knew I was going to get it. Hello, I had credits. I was such a little monster back then that I'm surprised I didn't walk in and hand her my resume. Afterward, I stood in a circle of girls who had tried out for the part and put on a show of asking everyone who they thought was going to get it. Even at the time, I knew that was bratty behavior, but did it anyway. Diva antics aside, The show was a hit. In the video, you can see me hitting every mark and making sure I enunciate every line. My parents were just as proud then as they were when I landed a role on national television. My mom even stayed up the night before, covering my shoes with gold glitter and red spray paint. The Wizard of Oz was definitely the highlight of my elementary school years. Even though I was still just in the single digits, it was pretty obvious that school and I weren't destined to get along. I got suspended twice before I even made it to 5th grade. My family moved a lot, and in total, I went to 3 different elementary schools. I was never nervous about being the new kid, though, and always had a pretty easy time making friends. In 2nd grade, I met my friend Madison, who is still my best friend to this day. Other friendships didn't have quite the same staying power. In 4th grade, I befriended this girl, Sarah, who was a total tomboy and kind of a bully. One day, she decided to spin me around by my hair. I screamed and screamed for her to stop, trying to keep up before she ripped my ponytail completely off my head. When she wouldn't stop, I resorted to more drastic measures and bit the hell out of her arm. It was a little bit of real-life foreshadowing of the Glee episode where Santana gets her ass kicked by Lauren and resorts to biting. That aside, somehow I got suspended and that bitch Sarah got off scot-free even though she'd started it. Unlike the creepy Bunyan teacher, not every teacher at the schools I attended was stoked about having an actress in their midst. At one school, it was clear from day one that the principal had it out for me and didn't consider acting a worthwhile pursuit. My parents were constantly fighting with the school to get it to recognize my on-set tutor hours, and you could see the look of disdain on the principal's face every time my mom would try to talk to her about how I was going to miss a few more days of school because of shooting. Like anyone learns anything in elementary school anyway. One day I was sitting in class minding my own business when I was suddenly called into the principal's office. "Naya," she said with all the seriousness of a counter-terrorism agent interrogating a member of ISIS. "Do you recognize this note?" She slid a piece of paper across the table and, sure enough, I did recognize it. It was a note I'd written to my friend Kate about a boy in our class. "Johnny smells so bad," I'd scrawled in pencil across a piece of wide ruled paper. "Sometimes I want him to die." When I nodded, she sat back smugly in her chair. "This," she said, "is a very serious matter." She called in my mom and announced that I was getting suspended yet again, but this time for making a death threat against a fellow student. My mom is not the kind of woman to take anything lying down, but I think at this point she'd had enough of this school and decided she wasn't wasting any more time on this woman than she already had. She just shrugged, told me to gather up my stuff, and we went home. It was the one time in my life that I didn't get in trouble with my parents for getting in trouble at school. Instead, I played in the park, watched tons of Nickelodeon, and had a pretty nice little vacation. Even as a child, I knew that acting was a job, and I liked that feeling of responsibility. I liked to work hard and felt fulfilled knowing that I was good at something. Sometimes this work ethic leaked into other areas of my life. I was competitive and didn't just play. I couldn't understand how other kids could do something and not try their absolute best. For example, between the ages of 6 and 10, I was an absolute beast when it came to handball. How this became my passion du jour, I have no idea, but I practiced at home so I could dominate the playground handball scene at recess. I was the champ of the court, and I got real mean when other people didn't take it as seriously as I did. In my grade, there was this one girl, Melissa, who was rumored to have been a crack baby or something, and she had a deformed hand. When we played handball, we turned into a bunch of trash-talking 7-year-olds, and Melissa made the mistake of calling me poor. I turned around and yelled, "Oh yeah? Why are you playing handball anyway when you only have one hand?" Then I went right back to whacking the shit out of that ball. I later apologized to Melissa because as soon as I walked off the court, the other kids were like, "Yo, Naya, that's messed up." And as the sweat dried off my forehead, I had to admit that, yes, it was really fucked up. So, lesson learned. Not all is fair in the name of love and handball. being a child actor and living to tell the tale. The royal family only lasted one season, but I really believe that it had all the elements of a great sitcom and could have been as successful as The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Family Matters if Red hadn't passed away. When this happened, my family obviously mourned Red's death, but we also mourned the passing of the show. That kind of opportunity doesn't come along very often, and when I was cast on the show, we saw it as the beginning of a long career. It was tough to watch it kind of sputter to a halt less than a year later. I could have been the Tatiana Ali of my day, and picking up residuals forever. In retrospect, though, I think that everything happened for me with my career at the perfect time. If I'd been a successful kid actor, I'd probably be way more crazy than I am now, and doing fucked up things with those residual checks. I think it's hard for child actors to make the transition to adulthood, on-screen and off-screen, because they have everything they want at such an early age. You get tons of attention, and people are always telling you how great you are, not to mention all the material perks. Even though you're a little kid, people turn you into the boss. This happens especially when the kid becomes the breadwinner in the family, and I think that is hard for the kids and the parents. How are you going to discipline a kid when they're the one making all the money? Also, when you're super successful as a little kid, you're not mentally developed enough to understand that things could change at any time. You just think your life is always going to be this cool. Then, all of a sudden, you hit that awkward stage in life. Your roles start to dry up and you're back to being a normal kid, even though you're totally unprepared for normalcy. Even if you still manage to keep it somewhat together, you're always going to struggle to get casting directors and audiences to see you as anything other than that kid from That Thing. Refer to Haley Joel Osment or Jonathan Lipnicki. I find the Olsen twins incredibly impressive because they somehow managed to make the switch from cute kids to cool adults without losing their minds. But I also think it's no surprise that they decided to focus on something other than acting. Sometimes I get annoyed when people assume I was just starting out when I was on Glee, when I've really been working since I was 5. But on the whole, I'm really thankful that I got to have several years of low-key behind-the-scenes training. As frustrating as it is not to get what you want right away, success is a lot sweeter when it's a slow build. You want to always be getting better and to be moving on to bigger opportunities. You want to be looking forward, not looking back wistfully at how you had everything you'd ever wanted at age 6. Who wants to peak as a kid, as a teenager, or even in their early 20s? Then it's all downhill for the next 6 decades, and that's just, well, yikes. I plan to live a long time, and I want each stage of my life to get progressively more fancy. If it's all uphill from here and I've still got some work to put in, then that's fine by me. I prefer it that way. Sorry. Making fun of an alleged crack baby on the playground, wherever you are, Melissa, I am so sorry about that. Male prisoners writing fan letters to a 5-year-old. Ugh, just creepy. Missed photo ops with super hot legendary rappers, though this sorry mostly falls on my parents. Drooling on Nicole Richie's knee. Sorry, girl. Red Fox's premature death and losing such a talented comedian, a warm person, and a loving surrogate grandpa. Not sorry. Getting introduced to my passion, acting, while still in preschool, and knowing even then that it was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Learning to memorize lines before I even learned to spell, an invaluable skill that stuck with me. All the outfits Red got me. Can't go wrong with head-to-toe gold. And all the outfits I got to wear on Family Matters. That Barbie Jeep, though. That I didn't become a famous child actor, or peak at age 9.